Permanent Record, by Edward Snowden. Introduction. Imagine a hotel room. 10th floor. The air is thick with stale room service air and the low hum of a laptop. Outside, the neon glow of Hong Kong paints the window, but inside, a young man, not yet 30, is making a decision that will end his life as he knows it. He looks more like a college kid who's been up all night studying than the world's most wanted man. He's thin, pale, with glasses perched on his nose. In his hands, he nervously twists a Rubik's Cube, the colorful squares a chaotic mess. This isn't just any young man. This is Edward Snowden. And he's waiting. He's waiting for the journalists he has summoned to this room, the ones he hopes will agree to tell the world a secret so massive, so profound, that it will shake the very foundations of our modern world. He knows that once this secret is out, there is no going back. The door to his old life will be sealed forever. The authorities will be coming for him. His family will be in shock. The woman he loves will be left alone, wondering what happened. Every path forward leads to a kind of exile, or a prison cell. Why would a young man, successful and brilliant, with a top-secret clearance, a high-paying job, and a life of comfort, throw it all away? Why would he risk everything for a principle? That is the question at the heart of Permanent Record. This isn't just a story about secrets and spies. It's a journey into the mind of a young man who grew up with the internet, who loved his country, and who found himself at the center of a machine so powerful, he believed it threatened the very idea of what it means to be free. By the end of our time together today, you will understand the path that led him to that hotel room. You will see how the internet, once a playground for freedom and creativity, was transformed into the most powerful tool of surveillance ever created. And you will discover the one profound lesson he learned, that sometimes, the most patriotic thing a person can do is to refuse to be silent. This is the story of a choice, and the world it changed. Book summary. Our story begins not in a clandestine government facility, but in the quiet suburbs of a childhood, with a boy who fell in love with a machine. Before Edward Snowden was a name whispered in the halls of power, he was just a kid fascinated by puzzles, games, and the magical glow of a computer screen. His father, who he called Lonnie, was an engineer in the Coast Guard, a man who tinkered with gadgets and brought home one of the very first home computers, a Commodore 64. Young Eddie would spy on his father from his bedroom window, which oddly looked into the den of the house. He'd watch, mesmerized, as his dad controlled worlds on the screen, bouncing balls to break down digital walls, or flying a tiny helicopter on a rescue mission in a game called Choplifter. To Eddie, his father was a hero, a pilot of digital worlds. And more than anything, he wanted to fly alongside him. That was his earliest memory of technology, not as a tool, but as a gateway to adventure and connection. His family was steeped in a tradition of service. Generations of Snowdens and his mother's family, the Barretts, had served the country in the military and government. Public service wasn't just a job, it was an identity. It was a core part of the family's DNA. This upbringing instilled in him a deep, unquestioning patriotism, a belief in the fundamental goodness of his country. But his true education didn't happen in a classroom. It happened on a Nintendo Entertainment System. From The Legend of Zelda, he learned that the world was meant to be explored. From Mega Man, he learned that his enemies had lessons to teach him. But it was Super Mario Bros. That taught him what he calls one of the most important lessons of his life. In that game, Mario can only move in one direction, forward. To the right. There's an invisible wall behind him, always pushing him onward, into the unknown. There is no turning back. Life, he realized, only scrolls in one direction. This digital world was a place of logic and fairness. A computer did exactly what you told it to do. If your input was flawed, the output was flawed. If your input was perfect, the output was perfect. For a young person navigating the often confusing rules of family and school, this was a revelation. Here was a world that was utterly consistent, unequivocally unbiased. A world he could understand, and in some small way, control. When his family got their first desktop computer with a modem, everything changed. He was about 12 years old, and the dial-up sound, that symphony of beeps, hisses, and static, was the sound of a new universe opening up. This was the early Internet, Web 1.0. It wasn't the polished corporate landscape we know today. It was a chaotic, creative, and profoundly human place. It was, as he describes it, the most pleasant and successful anarchy he's ever experienced. People weren't there to sell things, they were there to share things. Knowledge, passions, weird obsessions. The Internet was a community where you could be anyone you wanted. Anonymity was the norm. You chose a handle, a nim, and you could interact with a brilliant computer scientist or a basement-dwelling philosopher as an equal. All that mattered was what you knew and how you argued it. This freedom to explore different identities, to make mistakes without a permanent record, was the very essence of growing up. You could say the dumbest things one day and not be held accountable for them the next. It was a space that encouraged you to change your mind, to evolve, instead of digging in and defending a fixed identity. But as the 1990s gave way to the new millennium, this digital frontier began to change. The dot-com bubble burst, and companies realized that the real value online wasn't in selling products, but in selling people. The business model shifted from e-commerce to surveillance capitalism. The new product wasn't something you bought, the new product was you. Your attention, your activities, your desires, your location, all of it was being secretly monitored, packaged, and sold. The creative, individualistic web of personal sites began to collapse as people traded them for the convenience of a Facebook page or a Gmail account, not realizing that nothing they shared on those platforms would truly belong to them anymore. This shift troubled Snowden, but it was still a background noise to his life. The foreground was consumed by a world-shattering event. September 11, 2001. He was a young man of 18, working as a web designer, driving to work on a beautiful, clear morning when the news broke. Like so many Americans, he was filled with a sense of shock, horror, and then, a burning rage. The quiet, apolitical patriotism he'd inherited from his family ignited into a fervent nationalism. The world, once a complex place, was suddenly simple. It was us versus them, and he knew, with every fiber of his being, that he had to join the fight. He writes, "The greatest regret of my life is my reflexive, unquestioning support for that decision." His heart completely defeated his rational judgment. He wanted to be a liberator, to free the oppressed. He embraced the truth constructed for the good of the state, which, in his passion, he confused with the good of the country. Driven by this new sense of purpose, he decided to enlist in the army, hoping to join the special forces. He told his father he was doing it for his personal growth. Here was his chance to prove he wasn't just a brain in a jar, but a man of heart and muscle, willing to fight and sacrifice for his country. His military career, however, was short-lived. During a grueling training exercise at Fort Benning, Georgia, he suffered a severe injury, fracturing both of his legs. The dream of being a Special Forces sergeant was over. He was given a choice: start over from scratch, or accept an administrative separation. It was a clean break. He signed the papers and left on crutches, his military ambitions shattered. But the desire to serve was still there. If he couldn't serve with his body, he would serve with his mind. He realized his greatest contribution to his country would be through his expertise in technology. He set his sights on the intelligence community, the CIA and the NSA. This required a top-secret security clearance, a grueling process where the government digs into every corner of your life. During this waiting period, a new light entered his life. On a dating website called hotornot.com, he met a young art student named Lindsay Mills. She was smart, creative, and saw the world through the lens of a camera. Their connection was immediate and deep. They talked for hours, first online, and then in person. She became his confidant, his partner, and the love of his life. He told her he was going to work for the government and wouldn't be able to talk about his job. She understood. With his clearance approved, Snowden officially entered the world of intelligence. But it wasn't the world of direct government service his father had known. It was the age of the contractor. After 9/11, the intelligence agencies had exploded in size, and to get around hiring caps, they began outsourcing their most sensitive work to private companies. Snowden became what he calls homo contractus, a transient worker whose patriotism was incentivized by a paycheck. He was nominally an employee of companies like Dell, but his real work was for the CIA and the NSA. He rose through the ranks with astonishing speed. At 22, he was a systems administrator at the CIA, with sprawling access to some of the most sensitive networks on the planet. He was one of the young geeks who had, as he puts it, inherited the earth. The old guard of the agency, the political science majors and MBAs, didn't understand the new digital world. So they handed the keys to the kingdom to the kids who did. Snowden was part of the most significant change in the history of American espionage, the shift from the targeted surveillance of individuals to the mass surveillance of entire populations. He helped build the systems that made it possible. His journey took him from CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, to a diplomatic post in Geneva, Switzerland. In Geneva, he was a Technical Information Security Officer, or TISO. He was the one-man IT department for a secret spy base hidden inside the American Embassy. He was tasked with bringing the CIA's European stations into the digital future. This was where he first saw the agency's pivot to cyber intelligence. Instead of cultivating human sources, which was slow and risky, the agency was learning to hack. An agent could just send a target an email with a malicious link and gain access not just to their computer, but to their entire network. It was in Geneva that he also had his first deeply unsettling experience with traditional spycraft. He helped a case officer target a Saudi banker, hoping to recruit him as an asset. The plan went horribly wrong. The officer, Cal, got the banker drunk, had him arrested for a DUI, and then manipulated him into dependency. But when the pitch was made, the banker, feeling betrayed, refused. The man lost his job, his life in Switzerland was ruined, and he was sent back to Saudi Arabia. Snowden was horrified. He had put the whole affair in motion and was powerless to stop it. The experience left a bitter taste in his mouth and reinforced his belief that the future of intelligence was technical, not personal. It was cleaner, less messy. Or so he thought. In 2009, he moved to Japan to work for the NSA at Yokota Air Base. The NSA was on another level entirely. Technologically, it was light years ahead of the CIA. Here, his job was to engineer a global backup system for the agency's data. He created a program he called Epic Shelter, a massive, covert network that would ensure that even if NSA headquarters was reduced to ash, no data would ever be lost. He was, in effect, building a system that would keep a permanent record of the world's communications. At the time, he didn't realize this was, in his words, a tragic mistake. The turning point, the moment the first real crack appeared in his worldview, came during a conference on China. He was asked to fill in as a last-minute briefer on Chinese cyber intelligence capabilities. He stayed up all night, pulling top-secret reports from the NSA and CIA networks. He read, in astonishing detail, about the mechanisms of China's system of mass surveillance, How the government was collecting, storing, and analyzing the communications of over 1 billion of its own citizens. At first, he was simply impressed by the sheer technical audacity of it. But then, a disturbing thought crept in. He writes, "I had the sneaking sense while I was looking through all this China material that I was looking at a mirror and seeing a reflection of America. The fundamental rule of technological progress is that if something can be done, it probably will be done, and possibly already has been. There was no way America could have so much information about what the Chinese were doing without having done some of the very same things itself." This suspicion sent him on a search. He knew about the President's Surveillance Program, or PSP, authorized by George W. Bush after 9/11, which allowed for warrantless wiretapping. The public knew about it too, thanks to whistleblowers and reporting in the New York Times. But he sensed there was more to the story. The pieces didn't add up. The risks that other whistleblowers had taken seemed too great for what was publicly known. He went looking for the classified version of the Inspector General's report on the program. He couldn't find it. It was as if it didn't exist. Then, one day, by accident, a draft copy landed on his system. It had been left on a server he had access to as a sysadmin. It was flagged with a classification he'd never seen before: Top Secret //STLW. STLW stood for Stellar Wind. This was the NSA's deepest secret. It was the code name for the agency's true program of bulk collection, its euphemism for mass surveillance. Reading that classified report was like watching his world unravel. The unclassified version released to the public wasn't just a redacted version, it was a completely different document, a carefully concocted lie. The classified report laid it all bare. The NSA's mission had been fundamentally transformed. It wasn't just targeting suspected terrorists or foreign agents. It was collecting everything. The legal justification was a terrifying piece of lexical sophistry. The government argued that it didn't acquire or obtain your communications when it collected them and stored them in a database. It only obtained them if and when an analyst actually searched for and retrieved them. This meant the government could create a permanent record of everyone's life, a vast library of unobtained data, and then, at any point in the future, go back and search through it for a crime. This is where the concept of metadata becomes so important. Most people think of surveillance in terms of content, the words in your emails, the conversation in your phone calls. But the NSA was far more interested in metadata. Metadata is data about data. It's the record of your activities. For a phone call, it's who you called, when you called them, where you called from, and for how long. For an email, it's who you sent it to, when, from what computer. Metadata reveals the patterns of your life. It tells the story of your movements, your relationships, your habits, your interests. And you have almost no control over it. Your devices are constantly communicating for you, whether you want them to or not, pinging cell towers with signals that never lie. Snowden realized that content tells you what someone is thinking, but metadata tells you what they are doing. And in the world of intelligence, what you do is far more revealing. The weight of this knowledge was crushing. He felt, as he puts it, violated. He was an employee of the intelligence community who now realized he had been protecting not his country, but the state. He had helped to build an essential component of this system without realizing its true purpose. He was living in a beautiful country, Japan, with the woman he loved, but he felt like a stranger, lost and monitored. He writes, "I now understood that I was totally transparent to my government. It was telling my bosses where I was and when, even if I never touched the thing and just left it in my pocket." He returned to the United States in 2011, taking a high-paying job with Dell, working as a solutions consultant for his old agency, the CIA. He was now on the sales side, helping to build the agency its own private cloud. He was rich, successful, and living with Lindsay in a nice townhouse in Maryland. He tried to live in denial, to just make money and build a normal life. But the knowledge of the system was a constant, gnawing presence. His body began to betray him. He started experiencing strange symptoms, dizziness, clumsiness, moments of disconnect. One day, at home, he had a seizure and lost consciousness. He was diagnosed with epilepsy, the same condition his mother had. The stress, the secret, the internal conflict, it was all taking a physical toll. He took a short-term disability leave and spent weeks on his mother's couch, depressed and adrift, watching the world on his phone. He watched the Arab Spring unfold. Young people across the Middle East were rising up against authoritarian regimes, demanding freedom, dignity, and an end to oppression. They were fighting for the very principles his own government claimed to champion, yet was secretly subverting. The hypocrisy was sickening. He felt helpless, just an asshole in flannel lying around on a shabby couch. But then he realized there was something he could do. Protesters in Iran were being cut off from the internet. Using his expertise, he set up a Tor bridge relay from his home, a small technical act that could help someone in Iran bypass the government's firewall and connect to the outside world, protected by anonymity. It was a tiny act of defiance, but it was a start. He writes, "If burning himself to death was the last free act a Tunisian peddler could manage in defiance of an illegitimate regime, I could certainly get up off the couch and press a few buttons." This was the beginning of the end of his old life. He knew he could no longer live with the secret. The system was broken. Congress was failing in its oversight role. The courts were failing to provide a check on executive power. The entire constitutional system had been hacked. He decided he had to become a whistleblower. He took a new job, a demotion in title but a promotion in access. He moved to Hawaii in 2012 to work for the NSA again, this time as an infrastructure analyst for a contractor, Booz Allen Hamilton. This position would give him direct access to the agency's most powerful surveillance tools. His goal was to find the absolute limit of the system. Was there anyone this machine could not surveil? His new office was in a place called the Tunnel, an old Pearl Harbor-era airplane factory buried under a pineapple field. It was there that he began the final, most dangerous phase of his plan: read, write, execute. First, he had to read. He had to gather the proof. He built a program he called Heartbeat. It acted like a personalized newsfeed, automatically pulling the latest documents from across the NSA, CIA, and FBI networks. It was the perfect cover. The system was just doing its job, sharing information. But it was sharing it all with him. Heartbeat became his dragnet, turning the agency's own methods against itself. Next, he had to write. He had to make a copy of the truth. This was the most terrifying part. Every action on the NSA network leaves a trace. He couldn't just download files to a thumb drive. He devised a painstaking, multi-step process. He transferred the files to old, offline desktop computers under the guise of compatibility testing. Then, over long, nerve-wracking nights, he copied the documents onto tiny microSD cards, small enough to be hidden in his sock, his cheek, or even inside a Rubik's Cube, which became his ever-present prop, a tool of distraction for himself and the guards. Finally, he had to execute. He had to get the archive out of the building. Each time he walked down that long tunnel, past the guards and security checkpoints, he was petrified. He'd banter with the guards, play with his cube, anything to act normal, all while a tiny chip in his pocket held the secrets that could bring the world's most powerful government to its knees. He knew that the metadata in the files could be traced back to him. He made a conscious decision to leave it intact. He decided he would not remain anonymous. He would sign his name to his actions and accept the consequences. He began secretly communicating with journalists, documentary filmmaker Laura Poitras and columnist Glenn Greenwald. He used burner laptops and wardrobe around the island of Oahu, piggybacking on unsecured Wi-Fi networks from beaches and parking lots to send his encrypted messages. He needed partners he could trust, journalists who had already been targeted by the national security state and wouldn't buckle under pressure. In May 2013, the plan was set. He told his work he needed to take a medical leave for his epilepsy. He told Lindsay he was going away for a work trip. He left a note on the counter, "Got called away for work. I love you." He left his smartphone behind, a breadcrumb for the investigators. He went to the airport, bought a ticket in cash, and flew to Hong Kong, the city he had chosen as his meeting point with the journalists, and the place where the world would first meet him. The 10 days he spent waiting for them in that Mira hotel room were agonizing. He barricaded himself inside, living off room service, paranoid that at any moment the door would be smashed in. When Laura Poitras and Glenn Greenwald finally arrived, they were met by a young man with a Rubik's Cube. They were shocked. They had been expecting an older, grizzled cynic. Not a 29-year-old kid. For the next week, Room 1014 became the nerve center of the biggest intelligence leak in history. As Laura filmed, Snowden walked Glenn and another Guardian journalist, Ewan MacAskill, through the documents, explaining the complex architecture of global mass surveillance, PRISM, upstream collection, ski-score. On June 5, the first story broke. And then another. And another. The world was in an uproar. The U.S. government was in a frenzy to find the source. Snowden knew his time was running out. He made the final decision. He would not hide. He sat in front of Laura's camera and, in a now famous video, introduced himself to the world. "My name is Ed Snowden. I'm 29 years old." With his identity revealed, he was a marked man. He had to run. With the help of lawyers and Sarah Harrison from WikiLeaks, he planned his escape. The goal was Ecuador, a country that had granted asylum to Julian Assange. The only safe route was a series of flights that would take him through Moscow. On June 23, he boarded an Aeroflot flight from Hong Kong. He thought he was on his way to freedom. But as the plane was in mid-air, the U.S. State Department revoked his passport. When he landed in Moscow for what was supposed to be a layover, he was stateless. Trapped. He was met by agents from the FSB, Russia's intelligence service. They made him a cold pitch, "Come work for us. We can help you." He refused. He was adamant, he would not cooperate with any intelligence service. He spent the next 40 days and 40 nights living in the Sheremetyevo airport, a man without a country, applying for asylum to 27 different nations. None were willing to stand up to American pressure. Finally, on August 1, 2013, Russia, likely finding his presence an international nuisance, granted him temporary asylum. His layover, which has now lasted for years, had begun. He was in exile. While he was navigating this geopolitical chess game, the life he had left behind was being torn apart. The FBI interrogated Lindsay for days. They followed her everywhere. The media descended, painting her as a stripper, a whore, a clueless girlfriend. Her life became a public spectacle. In her diary, she writes of the anger, the confusion, the heartbreak. "Ed, what have you done? How can you come back from this?" She packed up their home in Hawaii, selling his life for parts at a yard sale. The things the FBI didn't take fit into a single small cardboard box. In a final, cathartic act, she burned the box in a metal trash can. "How could we have known," she writes, "that our own lives were about to erupt, that volcano Ed was going to destroy everything?" But then she remembers what a guide at a volcano once told her. Volcanoes are only destructive in the short term. In the long term, they create islands, enrich the soil, and make new life grow. In the winter of 2014, Lindsay flew to Moscow. She came to visit the man who had turned her world upside down. He expected a slap in the face. Instead, she placed her hand on his cheek. They held each other in silence. She moved to Russia to be with him. In 2017, they were married. His life now is one of digital connection and physical isolation. From a 2-bedroom apartment in Moscow, he beams himself onto stages around the world, speaking about civil liberties in the digital age. He serves as president of the board of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, helping to build the very encryption tools that can protect the journalists and citizens of the future. He is a man who lost his country, but found a new, global community. A man who sacrificed his own freedom to start a conversation about everyone else's. And in the quiet moments of his exile, he is still that boy who fell in love with a machine, who believed in the power of technology to connect us, and who now dedicates his life to ensuring that that connection does not become our cage. Commentary. Reading Permanent Record is a powerful, and at times, deeply unsettling experience. It's more than just a memoir, it's a foundational text for understanding the 21st century. It's a story about the collision of 3 powerful forces: technology, government, and individual conscience. What strikes me most about Snowden's journey is its profound sense of inevitability. He wasn't a radical or an activist. He was a believer. He was a patriot, raised in a family that revered public service. He entered the intelligence community to defend his country. The tragedy of his story is that the very system he swore to protect was the one he found himself forced to expose. His disillusionment wasn't a sudden crack, but a slow, grinding erosion of faith, born from seeing the gap between America's principles and its practices. The book is a stark warning about the nature of power in the digital age. The idea that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear is one of the most dangerous fallacies of our time. Snowden masterfully dismantles this argument. He shows us that privacy isn't about hiding things, it's about protecting things. It's about protecting the space to be human, to make mistakes, to explore ideas, to be vulnerable, to love, to dissent. It's the freedom to have a thought without having to worry about how it will be judged by an algorithm or a government agent. When we give up that space, we give up something essential about ourselves. He makes it clear that this isn't a partisan issue. Mass surveillance was born under a Republican administration and expanded under a Democratic one. The system, once built, has a life of its own. It's a machine that will always argue for its own expansion, and it will always find a justification, whether it's terrorism, crime, or public safety. But this book is not a message of despair. It's a call to action. It's a testament to the power of a single individual to challenge an entire system. Snowden's story reminds us that the technologies that are used to control us can also be used to empower us. Encryption, he argues, is the single best hope for reclaiming our privacy. It's a mathematical shield that can protect our communications from even the most powerful states. So, what can we take away from this? What can we do today? First, we can become more conscious of our digital lives. Think about the data you generate every day. Think about the apps you use and the permissions you grant them. It's not about becoming paranoid, it's about becoming aware. Second, we can start using tools that protect our privacy. Switch your text messages to an end-to-end encrypted app like Signal. Use a search engine that doesn't track you. These are small steps, but they are acts of resistance. They are a way of casting a vote for a more private, more human internet. And finally, we can continue the conversation that Snowden started. We can demand that our leaders and the technology companies we rely on be transparent and accountable. We can support the journalists and organizations that are fighting for our digital rights. Permanent Record is, in the end, a love story. It's about a young man's love for his country, his love for the internet, and his love for a woman who stood by him through it all. But most of all, it's about the love for an ideal. The ideal of a world where every person has the right to a private life, a space where they can think, and speak, and connect, and be, without being watched. That is a world worth fighting for. That was a summary of Permanent Record by Edward Snowden. We've touched on the major themes and the incredible story arc today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you make the journey yourself. The real power of this book is in the quiet moments, when Snowden's personal reflections or a technical explanation suddenly clicks, and you see the world in a slightly different way. This summary is here to help you decide if this story is one you need to explore more deeply. If anything we've talked about has sparked your curiosity or stirred your conscience, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you view your own life in this digital age. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to explore these incredible books and share their lessons. Let's keep learning and growing together.